So, welcome to the meeting of the whole meeting called open at 8:18 p.m. Let's go on to the adoption of the agenda. I move that the agenda be adopted as presented, Mr. Mayor. Seconded by Councillor Grimard. I have an item to add under members item with regards to the mayor's sponsored golf tournament. So we'd added on under 9.1 then, or under 5.1, should I say? Yes, that's fine then. Let's go on now to disclosures of pecuniary interests. All those in favor of the item addendum, fine. Disclosures of pecuniary interests, none. Delegations and presentations, none. Item 5, letter from Prescott Russell Community Services requesting reconsideration of Resolution 2019-35, being a request for the Clarence Creek Arena Community Center free of charge. Any comments on this reconsideration request? I believe that we came up with a decision earlier on, and we'll stick to that decision. I imagine, yes, we only asked that the employees' salary be paid to open up the arena. They'll have this venue free of charge, but the employer required to open it up for them. His remuneration needs to be paid, and we'll forward an answer to that effect to them. Let's go on now to notices of motion. What I want is the following, folks. When a mayor sponsors a golf tournament, no town employee is allowed to help out. Mrs. Laurence Séguin will be helping out. So there's no town employee that's mandated to take care of this. But Mrs. Séguin from time to time needs help in either from Mrs. Cicero or Mrs. Judy Chartrand, to go about advertising this event properly. Now, she'll be doing the greater part of the work, but she needs help, of course, and she can seek help from other employees. Just a clarification, is that a bylaw that stems from the City of Clarence and Rockland? That was something that was adopted in the past, Mrs. Collier. Well, can I ask why, Mrs. Collier? Because the mayor's tournament generates income for the community. Why could we not ask someone from the City of Clarence and Rockland to help out? Because this generates money for us. Yes, that generates the income to run our arena, our pool, well, any activities relating to those. We help out children and adults alike. So I punish myself because I'll be called upon to play golf. You know how good I am playing golf, and it's my golf tournament. Is this a municipal bylaw, Mr. Mayor? Yes, it is. So a previous council came up with that particular bylaw. Well, I'd like to we can continue on with the discussion that you've opened up, but I'd ask that the town administration take a look at this existing bylaw and amend it to allow extra help be given to those who need it to set up your golf tournament. That's what I'm asking, is additional help to second Mrs. Séguin in her efforts to set up the golf tournament. Fine, so we'll prepare a resolution to that effect. Mr. Boucher, do you have anything else to add? Well, if you wish to get replaced at the golf tournament, you can do so. Well, I accept. I can take his place. Rather, we'd like to make a good showing. Oh, let's go on. Question period. Now is question period. You have 3 minutes. If you come to the mic, you will give your name and address before you start. So you have 3 minutes. And if you have a question concerning any subject matter that's discussed within the confines of this meeting, you have 2 or 3 minutes. I'm asking that you give us your name and address. Have you stated it in English also, Mr. Mayor? Yes, I've stated it.
Whatever topic you have in this meeting, if you have any comments to do, now's the time to do it. You have 3 minutes. You come to the mic, give your name and address, and then say whatever comments.
Go ahead. Lance Rockwell, 2223 Joannis Road. I'm here about the Hammond Golf Course zoning amendment request. I was just wondering when it's like what exactly is going to be in the bylaw word for word. Like we were talking last time about defining it, limiting it, but it's still, I'm not aware that it's...
well, the size of the operation itself will not be something that they'll be able to produce beer to sell outside by the... It's only to supply the golf course itself.
But is it going to be in the bylaw that the size is limited to 850 square feet?
Yeah, it can be put in.
And also what is in there? And also the maximum beer production?
Yes, so it's only for the production of the golf course.
It's actually going to be in the bylaw amendment word.
It's not a Bose beer being built there.
Right. No, I was here, I understand. But I am very confused now about the amount of beer to be produced. Last time we were talking in the neighborhood of 28,000 liters
per year.
But I was looking at the file, and there's mention in the report of 170,000. That's just, I'm assuming that's water consumption.
Water consumption, yes. It takes an extra water to wash all the machines.
Okay.
But it was mentioned that this water would be recycled to clean all the machines after, and after it was recycled, would be sent out to the ponds for watering on the lots.
But in the report by the city, which is like the recommendation to council, it's talking about beer production, so there's some confusion there. It's actually saying those numbers, 170,000 liters per year is beer production.
Yeah, that's what's in the report, yes.
Right, so that's confusing.
Okay, Mr. Nadar?
Mr. Mayor, it's the next, I guess, item at the agenda, so I don't know if you want me to answer now or to wait until the...
Might as well.
Okay. So I don't know what the concern is about the amount of beer that's produced. The bottom line is that there's a certain amount of water that can be pumped out of that well, and regardless of what the use is for, they can't exceed that amount of water. They have a permit to take water.
I believe it's 40,000 gallons
per day. Liters per day.
That's currently allowed at the golf course.
That's currently allowed. So regardless of what usage they want to do, that's allowed. And the pump that's in that well cannot produce or cannot pump more than 28. I think it's 28 liters per minute, or the 48,000 liters per day. So it's impossible for it to even pump more water than what's allowed.
And plus, in the winter time, they don't work at all, so there's no water being pumped out.
But then what amount are we going to write in the bylaw?
Mr. Simov?
Is there something that's written anywhere that they're not allowed to change their pump?
Well, so it's a permit to take water, which is extremely lenient. It's ministry approval, and that's recorded every year how much water they've actually taken out of that pump. Every component, like the pump, the size of the pump, the capacity of the pump is all part of that. So for them to change the quantity or the size of the pump, they'd have to apply for a new permit to take water. That's tied to a hydrogeological assessment that identifies the capacity of the water table. So like this, it's not. They can't just remove the pump and put it in the pump.
I mean, the ministry, this applies to anybody that's using a lot of water, whether it's gardening, greenhouse, large gardening operation. They need a permit to take water.
Yeah.
So,
Even if it's a well?
yep.
Okay.
Sure, is that?
I just want to clarify, because I know we discussed this at planning committee and some people weren't there. The number is permitted at 40,000 liters a day. Okay,
Right.
this number is permitted
For the water.
for the water. It equals to 14,600,000 liters per year. And they're talking about a maximum of 298,000. They're
Right,
allowed
but
14 million.
But what I was bringing up is that there's confusion whether like what exact numbers are for beer production and what numbers are for water consumption.
And I understand your confusion. I think it's literally impossible to be able to tell you exactly how much beer they're going to produce. Could it be 300 beers a day, 400 beers a day?
Could we limit it in the bylaw, or you don't want to limit it in the bylaw?
No, it doesn't go by how much beer they make. It goes by how much water they're allowed to take. That's it. You can't tell them how. That's just like saying any store that has a license, where you can only sell 50 pairs of shoes. That's it. So tell someone how much they can sell or how much they can make, but we can cap them and tell them you are not allowed to take more than this amount of water. Right now, they're allowed to take 14,600,000 liters of water a year, and they're asking for 298,000. So you can see that
The size of the equipment itself cannot mass produce.
it's
Well,
very tiny.
well, 300,000 liters would be a significant production.
Yeah, but this is including water for cleaning and everything else.
Right, so if it is water consumption, but I'm not just worried about water, I'm more worried about, you know, it growing into a fairly big operation.
Can't.
No. Well,
But I would like to see it in writing, defined in the bylaw, if that's, I thought that was the understanding last time. If there's a way to limit the actual.
The draft bylaw is in there. If you said you were at the meeting last time?
Yes.
It's in the bylaw,
But it's in the bylaw.
and I'm what Ed just told me.
The-
Well, I'm not sure if it's in the bylaw, but the bylaw is available on the website.
The bylaw just says to add food production to the, like, I didn't see any numbers in the.
We already have food there. It's
Monsieur
also-
Leonard?
So, Mr. Mayor, we're not, just to confirm, we're not limiting how much beer can be produced in the bylaw. It's not something that we would typically do for a bylaw of this nature. So, the production is limited by the amount of water they can pump. Under this usage, which is the food production, you wouldn't limit how much beer is allowed to be produced.
At the same time as the construction permit, they got to put the building, equipment in. It's not a big setup. It cannot produce like Bo's beer would produce.
The square feet then, you were saying before the square foot would be in the bylaw.
Well, it's in the building permit, because they have to get a building permit.
Well, not the building permit, the bylaw, is it going to be in the bylaw
Yeah.
as well?
So in the bylaw, it says that it's limited to 85 square meters. So that's in terms of the area of the building. In terms of, like I said, in terms of production, it's really limited to their capacity to pump under their permit to take water, and also the capacity of the septic system, how much that is going to be able to, I guess, receive the additional water, and no building permit is going to be given if the septic system doesn't meet that requirement. So this doesn't automatically mean that they're going to be able to do that production here. There are some other things that they need to satisfy.
Because I think your main concern is you're worried about the aquifer, to make sure you have enough water to sustain your own household and your neighbor's household. Because we don't know how high the water table is and all of that stuff. That's part of your worry. From the report.
I guess so. My main worry actually is if this is large enough. Like I'd like the numbers defined. I like the 28,000 liters that was discussed last time. The 7,000 gallons of beer a year, or not gallons. Yeah, gallons of beer per year. That sounded really tiny, and I like that better than an undefined.
See, and I think Mr. Hunter touched on it, the motion tonight is just to permit this type of business on that property. It doesn't limit exactly how big the business could become.
And
So
that's my worry.
there's other permits and other South Nation will have to get involved. The ministry will have to get involved should they exceed what they're in here, what they said that they wanted to do. Because as Mr. Lenhart stated, we need to make sure the septic bed is able to process the water that's being used. And there's a slew of other factors. This is just a permit for them to look into doing that brewery. If they come back and Mr. Lenhart his team doesn't like what the numbers are and stuff, he won't get a permit.
But my worry is this zoning amendment opening up the door to a potentially larger operation later if it's
It could, if everything calculates the same way.
But there'll be another process. To answer your question, it can't get any bigger, it's capped than what we got there.
Avec ce qu'il y a comme capacité. Mais
Let's say 40, if you look at it this way, 40,000 liters a day that they can use right now. Does anybody know how much they're using? They've been monitoring those wells. for quite a few years. How much are they using approximately per day now? Does anybody know?
We'll get one of the owners come up after to give us the explanation.
28 liters a minute times whatever.
That's the max, though.
That's the
That's the
max.
max, but
Yeah.
what are they using right now?
We'll get the answer
They're not
after.
using that, no. That's what I'm asking.
Gentlemen, sure, give them.
I understand where he comes from too, because of the discussion that we had with the committee. There were more information on the wild. Although we can't limit the consumption, we can sure specify that the resale is for the golf course only on the business permit, correct? Could we do that?
That's business permit, I don't know.
Well, and I just want to make sure that when we're all gone and it's another council and the business is still going, that we want to make sure, and that was the main concern of the
Yeah, but the thing is, it's the size of the operation. Their building permit is only allowing so many square feet.
And I can appreciate that. There's no, it's just that after that, further down the road, they could come back at another council, we have this in memory, and they could ask for an expansion.
Yep.
Yeah.
What we want to ensure is that there are no expansion.
Yeah,
I
but-
think that's their concern.
Maybe we can have one of the owners come up and explain some of the amounts.
Well,
And you can, I'll let you sit down, I'll let the explanation from the owner, and you can come back after.
quick question? Oh,
Okay, I'll let you come back after.
okay, sure.
Okay.
Sure, thank you. Good evening, Eric Martell, 250 Cardinal Crescent, Toronto. So really what we talked about before, we're talking about today is we're limited by the square footage of the space that we can build in. I brought with me the plans of the equipment that we intend to use. We have a couple of limitations. A, we have the square footage limitation, and we also have the limitation of the height. So these products, these fermentation tanks that we're obliged to use are quite tall. We can only get a 7-barrel system in there, and that represents 220 gallons if we fill it up from the bottom to the top per brewing session. Each brewing session requires 12 to 14 hours, so we're anticipating with cleanup and everything else, maybe 4 a week. So we physically can't get bigger because the space, unless we blow off the roof, we're limited by the roof and the square footage of the space. Completely limited, so.
I guess what they probably don't, what they want to know is,
Yes.
are you planning on blowing up the roof and moving down the walls?
No.
So that's what they're
No.
worried about.
The intention, we had this brewery before, we were on Canatech Road. We were in a smaller format, so as it is, we're going to a larger format. We don't know exactly where we're going to go. All we could really do is maybe brew one more time a week, but we're limited by days and the size of the
And
equipment.
you're closed during the week.
Well, I don't know. That part I'm not sure about.
Okay.
But even if it was, we would go to a reduced production scenario.
Yeah.
Yeah. They're closed this winter, but that's kind of more construction related.
Okay.
I think it's also important to understand that should the brewery want to expand, there would be a second public process, right, through the application process, so any concerns can be raised at that point about an expansion.
Because if they went bigger too, they have to get a building permit, and that building permit could be refused, so
Correct.
then we would should have that.
Why should we limit just to the golf club? Let's say he's producing 7 barrels 4 times a week, and he can't sell this beer only at the golf club. It can't be consumed all. He's not going to throw it away. He made the beer. If he can sell it, I mean, why not? As long as he's not exceeding his $40,000, 40,000 liters a day. I mean, why should we
Well,
stop
right now-
a business?
But right now, though, it's just a cement, right?
Yeah.
So we can just
So
discuss
they're just
that.
producing for now they're for the golf course. It's not gonna get bigger.
If you want something else, though, we can.
They'll have to be brought back to.
Like at most, when we do a batch of beer, sorry to interrupt, the most we could consume is 800 liters. That's all we can take. The tanks, it's like a big kettle. It only accepts so much water. We can't add more. It's impossible. So that's absolutely capped what we can put into the kettle.
Okay. Can we have that stuff put in, Mr. Mayor?
Pardon?
Can we have this stuff put into the bylaw? Or
I think
a
there's
resolution?
nothing we can. So the thing is, they are bound by the size of their operation.
Right.
Okay.
That alone is.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're happy with just selling at the golf course, or would you prefer being able to sell it out of?
I'd like to know that we have the opportunity to Michelle's point. If we have extra beer, I don't want to throw it away.
So why do we have that concern that we only want to have have it there? Why
Because
does
that's what was discussed at the management meeting.
Because then if he all of a sudden is starting to produce to sell, now he's using a lot more water. So that they're on a...
Well, my thought is if he's within the water, he's a...
Monsieur Léonard?
I just want to make sure that we're just on the same page in terms of the amount of water they're allowed to use is 40,000 liters per day, regardless of what they're using it for.
Right.
And they can't exceed that. Even if they increase the size, even if that is the permanent take water they have, in order for them to change that, they need to do a hydrogeological assessment to identify like the aquifer can even support a bigger take. So there's so many hurdles before we're even talking about upsizing that they're really limited to their permit to take water, and a lot of that water is already used for their operations, their seasonal operations, the facilities that they have. So they're really limited in terms of what it is that they can expand.
So my only point is like, I think it's great that you're bringing in this kind of idea, and when we're talking about economic development and you want to have, we don't have a brewery in Clarence Rockland. If you're able to get a buzz going about things that are going on here, if you're able to export that beer, small batches, different places and stuff, it is, it is trendy, the microbrewery. So I don't understand why it needs to be limited. If he's not going to get into a large organization, it doesn't matter. But to at least be able to have that option to sell it off.
I just don't want residents to run out of water. That's
that's not going to happen. He's not allowed to take more out.
So we don't know.
Yeah, but his license is...
But my point is, you make beer, and at some point you want to export it, you want to market it, you want to make Clarence Rockland more known around. You're trying to grow a business, which is fine. And if you're attracting more people, to the golf course, you're attracting more people to the area. I think it's good for business. He's already limited. He's going to produce what he's going to produce. I'm just questioning, why is it that we're going to cap him even more? So, well, you can only sell out of the club. Why could he not have that flexibility to sell it off if he wants to?
The only reason why we're saying that is that the previous meeting we were at, which unfortunately you were not, he said that it was only going to be for the golf course. Okay. These are his words. So that's why we approach it that way. Now, if we know that the water limit is respected, I have no problem, and he's limited by the square footage, then I've got assurance that he will not go above.
And I think it was mentioned last time, if you're playing golf, you have a few pints, you want to bring a six-pack home, he's allowed to sell it. So that way it makes sense. Monsieur Levac lives close to there, he'll take the action.
It was also truck related too. Like we thought if he was going to go and sell it, it'd be like these trucks coming out and loading up, and that was what we discussed on planning as well.
7 barrels, to give you an idea, is very small. It's probably one of the smaller microbreweries out there.
I'm not concerned.
No.
We're just rehashing for the people that weren't at planning.
Yeah.
Okay. If you want to come back, sir,
Yes, can I ask
the other gentleman, I told him he could come back after.
No, I just would like to ask the gentleman.
I'm asking this gentleman here first, and then you can come up after.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think we answered all your questions.
So the 220 gallons that he mentioned, is that now water consumption or beer? Like, I'm still confused.
It doesn't, sir, it doesn't matter. He's allowed 40,000 liters a day.
Well, I'm more worried about the scale of the business rather than
we just
the actual water
explained it. He's limited by the square footage, and he's limited by the amount of water he can consume. So
if he wants a bigger place, he'll come back.
He'll have to come and get a building permit.
Well, that once the zoning is in place, then it's somewhat different, though.
If he wants to go bigger, he needs a building permit.
But at least the zoning he's already got covered. So it is. It's a different procedure probably once the zoning is already in place. So that's.
If he wants a bigger building, like the mayor said, he'll have to come and get.
Right. But he already has the zoning, so he's already.
Yes, but the permit would still have to be approved.
Right. Would there even be a public notice about a permit?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Well, yeah.
Okay.
But I did have a question.
Your 3 minutes is almost up, sir.
Well, it's a very quick one. If originally the plan was for consumption, I understood on the premises and a very small scale. I was wondering if you actually even need a zoning amendment if it was on that scale. Like the definition that you're using is food production, but that's for consumption primary, not on the premises. And that really doesn't even apply in this case, it would seem.
Maybe we should let her.
So, Mr. Mayor, there's two ways you could do this. You could either add brewery into your definition in your bylaw, but because it's not in there, we've went with the food production.
And that,
they both allow
that
for the same.
It.
Yeah, so they both allow for the same thing in terms of brewery. So that's why the amendment was made. The current zoning did not allow for this type of usage, so it's to change the usage.
But if it's just making beer for your customers in the restaurant, do you even need a?
Yeah.
Well, we do. That's why we're doing the zoning
amendment?
change.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir. 3 minutes, sir. Your name and address, please.
Thank you. Last time I also took too much time, so I apologize that I didn't know about the 3-minute limit. Now I know, so I will make it shorter. But my main objection is that nothing was spelled out in the application about the quantities. And last time it was my understanding that those quantities will be spelled out in the application, like beer quantity, water, sewage.
We can.
But it's still blank. The application is still blank as far as this information goes. There is not a single word in the application about this. There are information in the file about additional quantities which are confusing, and last time when I made the presentation, I assumed the highest quantity possible under microbrewing, which turned out to be a little bit overblown. But on the other hand, there are confusing figures floating around, and on the other hand, this is now all verbal. And I looked at the file, and from the last meeting, the synopsis is very sketchy, very little. And let's say in a few years, when we run into bigger problems because of the brewery, there might be different people on the council, different mayor, who knows, and nobody will know anything what was verbally
No,
said.
sir, it's all on file. All the information is accessible anytime. They can go back, and that information will be brought back. That's no problem.
Okay.
Okay, we should
Well,
have.
it certainly is not in the file.
We can't have everything on the file, sir.
Okay, if it's...
It's just like the conditions for them. They need all kinds of studies. They have to prove the studies to get there. And that's
Okay,
all that,
so-
but it's not on the file.
As far as I'm concerned, so my main objection is that the application is not complete in the sense that these figures are not spelled out in the application. And that's where all the confusion and the unnecessary talk and discussion and all.
But he has a license only for 40,000 liters a day. So that is law. He can't go over that.
But I looked at the well studies before the water permit was approved, and it appears that the water quantity is not measured. The water level is measured.
Yeah.
So, and then they have to estimate how much water they took based on the water level. Well, it's black magic.
Well, it's easy to estimate. All you have to figure out is what the size of your pump, what pump output it gives, and you'll know exactly how many liters of water you're going to
and you
put
can
out.
pump 5 times as much and write
No,
anything
we already
you want.
mentioned he can only, that pump is made to pump 40,000 liters a day. He can't put a bigger one because his license stops him at 40,000 liters, sir. Mr. Zant.
I'm hoping to be able to clarify something.
Mr. Zant.
I'm hoping to clarify something. You were at the planning meeting. You seem to be bringing up the exact same issue, so I'll clarify using exactly what Councillor Jamal said. The net magic number you have to worry about is 40,000. Whether it's beer, water, doesn't matter. 40,000 liters is the maximum he can use. It is gauged by a meter, and he cannot go over that.
It's not
All
clear.
of the information will be in the report and will be finalized through that. That's it. There's nothing else to say on this.
Now, I still go back to the point that the application doesn't spell out the beer quantity, doesn't spell out the...
Well, we can't. Now, we're repeating. Sir, your 3 minutes is up.
Okay.
Thank you.
The other thing is just a short thing is that I would like to see the zoning amendment wording before it comes to approval, so that I know exactly ahead what will be approved.
Sir, it will be approved in 2 weeks from now at the regular meeting.
And will the exact wording or the exact text be available for
It'll be
inspection?
available on the website.
so I can inspect it before.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
On a d'autres questions?
Any other questions? Does anyone else have any other questions of Town Council? None? Fine, thank you. Let's go on to the United Counties of Prescott-Russell report. Nothing much to add. Mr. Mayor, I just have a question for you, however. You have 3 minutes too, sir, and that's it. Well, I won't even take up 3 minutes. Name and address? All right, you should know it by now, I think, Mr. Mayor. There was a report that was released a couple of weeks ago. It was made public through the United Counties Prescott-Russell through its website concerning the survey they conducted with the businesses with regards to economic development, and many conclusions in that report that I looked at, that it would be important for us as a city to have access to data that would be important. Well, the counties issued their own report. We have our own report, along with the names of businesses. Yes. I believe I asked Judy. Judy is the one that took care of the survey. We do have a hard copy with regard to the local survey we conducted. I was looking through my emails. I didn't come up with it. Judy took care of the survey that was locally conducted here. We're not talking about the United Counties of Prescott-Russell survey here, but a local survey. Anything else? Committee reports? Zoning bylaw? Go ahead. Whereas the proposed amendment to the City of Clarence and Rockland zoning bylaw for 600 du Golf Road is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the official plan of the United Counties of Prescott-Russell. That the Committee of the Whole recommends that Council adopts a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2016-10 in order to add food production to the list of permitted uses in the zoning category tourist commercial exception to CT-2 zone in order to permit a microbrewery limited to an 85 square meter floor area as recommended by the Planning Committee. So seconded by Councillor Levert. All those in favor? Any questions? That's fine then. Let's go on. Item 9.2. Statement of development charges for the year 2018, whereas the treasurer of the municipality must submit annually to the municipal council financial statements on development charge, bylaw, and on reserve funds established under section 33-1997, chapter 27, paragraph 43 sub A of the Development Charges Act. Therefore, be it resolved that the municipal council of the city of Clarence and Rockland accept the statement of development charges, reserve funds for the year 2018 year end as presented in report FIN 2019-009. Seconded by Councillor Levert. Any questions? All those in favor? Carried. Just a comment, Mr. Mayor. I thought that in 2018, we'd already reached our targeted goals with regards to this, but where I guess we fell short. So that means that 3 out of the last 4 years with regards to development programs we've implemented, we haven't met the 75 unit target that we set for ourselves. Mr. Desnoyers, in effect, the targeted goal was 175 residences per year, but we came up with a final amount of 170. I believe the reports that are forwarded to you on a monthly basis, I believe, with regards to construction activity was a bit higher. Well, I think it hovered in between 200 and 205 units. Well, not all units will be invoiced development charges. For example, if a home is replaced by another home, it will not be necessarily charged back a development fee, you see. All those in favor? Carried then. Item 9.3, zoning bylaw amendment, 733 Industrial Street. Mr. Grimard, that the Committee of the Whole recommend that Municipal Council adopt a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw 2016-10 in order to change the zoning category of the subject property from General Industrial Zone MG to General Industrial Exception 5 MG-5 zone in order to permit a daycare as principal use as recommended by the Planning Committee. All right. That's, again, with regard to the Kimberly Herald for RAN Enterprises Incorporated property. Any questions? Councillor Lalonde? Well, Mr. Mayor, I have a great deal of difficulty in visualizing a daycare center operating within an industrial park complex. And the reasons that justify my worries is that this is not the best use to make of this particular land, and it would prevent us from future development potentially in this particular park. We talked about transforming the soccer field to be able to sell it off from an industrial standpoint. We even paid Hydro to bring electricity to the ATG concept to make sure that there was enough power, sufficient power, to power that area for development purposes later on. And I believe that Mr. Leonard, at a certain point in time, had pondered the idea of building a roundabout in the industrial sector, and it gave rise to fairly spirited discussion because these trucks need an area to turn around, and where they would turn around if things stand as they are right now would be right smack dab in front of the proposed daycare center. So I'm not questioning the need for a daycare center within Clarence and Rockland. That's self-evident. But I imagine that given all other areas that do exist here in the city of Clarence and Rockland, we have Brésil with regards to Phase 5. Clément develops quite a lot also. And we need empty buildings also within the city of Clarence and Rockland that could be converted for use as daycare centers. And I imagine that the deposit that will be given back to the owner to allow him to build his garage to warehouse all of his trucks. Now, all of these people, the ATG people, might, given the within the next 10 years, be called upon to grow if the trend remains as it does for their growth potential. And if there's a daycare center there, that will prevent any further growth, should I say, for this particular company. Well, Mr. Zant? Well, firstly, it's not an industrial park. We're talking about an industrial street. There is a difference. That's not necessarily an extraordinarily big and complex thing. In Ottawa, there is an industrial park that does house 3 daycare centers. At a certain point in time, we have to say to ourselves that space is space. Now, with regards to the trucks that might potentially turn around there, well, they certainly don't turn around there at present, and especially if a daycare center operates there, they'll be reluctant to turn there, period. So if we're taking a look at another daycare location within the confines of city of Clarence and Rockland, I would say those spots that we've thought of are a bit more dangerous. Dangerously situated than within an industrial park. Well, I think we were thinking of exploiting only the 723 address. Well, apparently we can't only be limited to the 723 address. We're talking about the complete lot. That is, well, we have a CrossFit gym that exists there. There's a virtual game center. We have another business in front of the Ultramar at the plaza. So there are no green spaces that will attract children along the sidewalk area. If I take a look at the industrial park, I'd be very much interested in determining how many vehicles travel there on a daily basis. There's Pilon Fasteners, 5 employees, ATG 20 employees. ATG has to build an entrance and an exit on its property to allow access and egress to trucks. patronizing their business, basically. If there is a soccer field that we might build there, we can make an exemption for the zoning bylaw. This office has been up for rent for the past 14 months. We have an opportunity to create a unique daycare center within the city of Clarence and Rockland. There's a lady that already has 20 or so reservations already on paper, and I've spoken to Mr. Boucher. We have waiting lists here in Clarence and Rockland for those making use of daycare centers or wishing to making use of daycare centers. I have no qualms as to that. If you're asking me where to put a daycare center, then I'll say industrial parks are an ideal situation, and we can modify the bylaw as things go by. It's an excellent project. It stimulates employment. It offers a service that we need in the city of Clarence and Rockland. If we block development, we're going to be blocking development here, there, and everywhere. Well, I'm going to state my view here. There will be a water filtration plant on the other side generating odors on the other side of the street. ATG is already operating in a building right neighboring the proposed site here. And there might be other businesses that will operate around that area. Well, we are the ones deciding. I agree, but it's going to impose restrictions even upon this owner that owns buildings on all three properties. That's why I'm not too much in agreement with this. Councillor Levert, well, I believe that the lady spoke to the committee. She did her homework, and there's no available space here in Rockland for daycare needs. If there would be empty spaces available, well, they're snapped up quite readily by other businesses or other interests. I'm entirely in favor of this daycare project. At a certain point in time, if there's ever an odor-related problem, parents will complain, and they might make use of another service or move to another service center. Of course, they'll be putting in new filters to that water filtration complex there. Well, look, I live on Chapman Street, and there's a smell all summer long. Well, Mr. Levert, I'd just like to give you a few details with regards to the industrial park complex and the way in which things are pinpointed because of potential use. Well, there's potential use there. Number one, let me give you an example. ATG is synonymous with industrial class 1 use. Now, if we are to incorporate a daycare center in that particular zone, it's akin to a sensitive land use, and we are compelled to respect a distance of separation in between individual properties there. There might be a request made so that distance be reduced, but for the department to be able to support this particular application, and the documents and the analysis that needs to be performed and forwarded to the City of Clarence and Rockland to support their request, for example, odor analysis, sound analysis, noise analysis. It's impossible for us to support this particular request from an administrative standpoint. However, this also applies to a change of use request for a daycare center and for any other use or contemplated class 1 industrial use. And a perfect example is the ATG building that was previously occupied. Now, if there are other ATG type businesses that wanted to set up shop there, it would be difficult for it to do so because of the separation constraint that needed to be applied. So they'd have to apply through a minor variance or zoning bylaw to be accepted to operate in that same zoning confine, if you wish. So I don't know what the precedent is that applies to a daycare center. Even if Town Council would support this project, it doesn't mean that it would be going any further than that, and it would limit also the potential development of these properties there, because the use would probably be Zone 1 or Class 1 industrial with regards to Zone 1 use. Listen, I'm not going to change my view. You know my position with regards to economic development, and we should encourage any businesses that wish to set up shop here. There's a lot of work that we anticipate doing to start up or to encourage startups, especially with regards to industrial businesses. Now, if we set aside money to be able to purchase another piece of land, and if we had another player that got involved in the mix that would say, well, let's work in changing things as they stand, for example. And, for example, let's say that the only piece of land available would be the one that's now being used by a stalker field. And if we are to tell ourselves that we can't exploit that land for industrial use. I'm sorry to interrupt you. You're telling us that if we have a power to make a variation, we can change things, but it can be objected to. Yes, but we can deal with objections on a regular basis. But it could be refused because of the fact that it would be too close to a daycare center, for example. If I am told that there's no danger, if we wish to develop these properties further and we're able to come to an agreement, but I have a deep-seated worry to lose a potential big taxpayer that would enhance our quality of life here versus a small daycare center. Of course, I know that a daycare center does cater to a certain need within the city of Clarence and Rockland. I know this, and I want to encourage this. However, I'm worried with regards to security, and I'm worried about those constraints that could be applied to land that could be developed beside these existing industrial properties. I'm not sure it's a good gamble. Well, to your answer, Mr. Campbell, we were able to split the CIH parking lot in two to accommodate other uses. But that's not what we're saying. I'd ask Mr. Leonard something else. You're saying that we'd have to commission noise studies. Well, we did not commission similar studies in other areas where daycare centers were built. We're talking about the reduction of the 20-meter principle here. So if you want to reduce the 20-meter separation, you have to do so through a minor variance or through a zoning bylaw request, you see. But for us to be able to support the decision taken or the recommendation or the request, they have to come up with documents, studies that have previously been commissioned. These studies have been identified in the official plan. And we're dealing here with a sensitive land use. Daycare center is considered as a sensitive land use. So if you resort to a sensitive land use within a 20-meter distance in a Class 1 industrial zone, you have to come up with those studies to show that there won't be a sensitive impact with regards to sensitive land use. Well, what study was commissioned for the CrossFit gym that is there? Well, it's not considered as sensitive land uses here, but there are children making use of this complex. That doesn't matter. So if you decide to open up a gymnasium, slow but sure, without ruffling any feathers, you can do so. Don't get me wrong now. I understand the separation constraint. I understand this. The distance separation constraint. And if I take a look at this and the work that this lady will have to resort to meet with the United Counties constraints, and there's no other property that will cater to her needs, and we say that we'd like to promote economic development, then we'll have to tell her no. The lady checked the size of what she needed, the property, then we're missing an opportunity. We might talk about a gamble. On one side, we're encouraging economic development, but we have an opportunity also that would request minor variance, but that would create employment also. But we're saying no, because we're afraid that the next entity or business or establishment that might want to settle there might not meet the minimum criteria. Look, we don't have to put the horse before the cart in this one. Well, why don't we go about it this way? That this exception could not impact closer or closed businesses. If we resort to the zoning bylaw that would be applicable only for this section. Mr. Mayor, you see, you can't apply it this way. This is squarely a usage need to be able to operate a daycare center, you need to meet the criteria set out in sensitive land use. There are some things that are considered as sensitive land use. A daycare center meets that criteria. Now, right beside that proposed land is a business that is zoned industrial or for industrial use also. And you need to meet the separation, the physical separation criteria. Council will decide whether they accept this or not. But the only way in which we can support this type of request is, well, there are some studies that were commissioned that might show that would be no impact on sensitive lands. These studies I have pinpointed, I have identified. They are there. There's no need to have recourse to further studies, simply based upon our knowledge of neighboring lands that are made use of for industrial purposes. So, given this, we can't recommend this, and at the end of the line, the council can either vote for or against this proposal. Now, of course, we don't know how things might turn out in the future, or if an appeal is launched with regard to this decision taken tonight, we could be subject to an appeal because of the fact that a study was not commissioned, because this business operates, or this daycare center operates within an industrial zone. Well, who can appeal? Well, given any proceeding, anyone can appeal this particular decision. But we're talking about one owner for all 3 properties. That is the owner. I'm in agreement with you. I'm just identifying that there is this risk that does exist. And if we go to appeal, we don't know what the outcome would be. That's not something that is done regularly. Councillor Simard. Well, look, if someone wants to make use of the neighboring land or property and wants to build an industry or a business there, you'll have to incur additional costs. Is there a way then to split those costs so that that person that wishes to do this would be solely impacted? What are you getting at? Well, look. Let's say that Jean-Jacques wants to build a business in that area. Jean-Jacques does. Now, he'll have to incur extra costs for, noise reduction or noise impact to have this minor variance 20-meter limitation that is imposed. So that's an additional burden imposed upon a company that wishes to develop it there. Is there a way to share costs? I don't think we can do so in Ontario, sir. Well, if so, one does not bring about the other. Well, I know that you do not have the right to eliminate a few things, such as what you're proposing when you're in Ontario. Maybe in Quebec, but not here in Ontario. Well, we do eliminate. You see, what the department seems to say was that these tests are required to set up a daycare center there. But if we vote in favor of this, we are doing away with that need. For us to support this request, sir, we need to determine whether there was an impact or there is an impact or not. So tonight, if we say we accept it, the same rule would apply for any other type of red tape that would be imposed for any other business that would like to set up shop and would ask us to do so. Well, if you are operating within an industrial use area, you'd have to resort either to a minor variance, notwithstanding how this property is zoned. They'd have to go through the steps that I've alluded to reduce the 20-meter imposition or limit. And you'd have to come up with those studies that we've alluded to up to now, noise reduction and so on and so forth. And it behooves Town Council to take the final decision with all the facts in hand. Well, I'm going to ask that a registered vote be called, Mr. Mayor. No problem. Councillor Guillemot, in favor. Mr. Zant, in favor. Mr. Cardarelli, opposed. No. Councillor Bouchard, opposed. Councillor Levert, in favor. Sir, no. Opposed, and I'm opposed. Fine. The vote is registered then. Very well. So it's adopted. There are 5 in favor, 3 opposed. Fine then. Fine then. Mr. Guillemard, those who are opposed, Mr. Mayor, Councillor Lalonde, and Councillor Cardellali is opposed to that. I voted against this. Fine. 5 in favor, 3 opposed. Fine. So let's go on now. Transportation impact study and modification to a condition of draft approval of Bridgeville and Stage 5 Morse Village. Mr. Levert. Yes, whereas a condition must be modified under the Bridgeville and Morse Village Stage 5 draft approval, that condition 26 of the Bridgeville file and condition 29 of the Morse Village Stage 5 file be modified to read as follows. Mr. Mayor, that Poupard Side Road, Bronze Avenue, and St. John Street be designed and built to municipal standards with an urban cross-section approved by the city. The design should follow the recommendation of the detailed transportation impact study that was completed by Glen Consultants December 2, 2018 with any subsequent revisions, if applicable. The design, the environmental studies, the EA, the construction work, the project management fees, and any other studies or works required are to be paid by the development charges bylaw and the municipal budget in place for the current year. The estimated cost of the design and works to be completed must be approved by the city before any undertaking. Seconded by Councillor Zant. Any questions then? Councillor Lalonde. Mr. Lennart, when we're dealing with designs, would this be a final design, or can this be fine-tuned to meet whichever evolving changes? Well, there'll be a lot of roundabouts on Poupard. I imagine there's one that's overlapping another existing roundabout as things stand. Or can this evolve? No, in effect, this is a concept that we're promoting right now, and we can come up with different solutions, of course, to meet different needs. Really, whether there's a roundabout there or not, it's just a way of addressing the needs for an intersection. The recommendation is to build a roundabout in that area because of the traffic flow condition that's prevalent there, but it could be addressed in another way. There's not much difference in between, let's say, existing traffic flow through an intersection and traffic flow with regards to a roundabout. Councillor Zant, I am very confused, obviously, because I'm not a planner. But we seem to be planning about an east-west passage in there somewhere. We're talking about a roundabout, about Stage 5, about Bridgeville. I'm completely lost as far as did the actual traffic statement say? What does it actually say? Can we actually build Bridgeville and Stage 5 with the Morse Village, with the current road that we have, or do we need to build an east-west passage like we were talking about to actually meet the traffic in there, because we know exactly how much the traffic is there?
Condition, but it also recommends the upgrades within the time based on the projected development. So as development occurs, like it's staged,
right?
And as development occurs, then some of these things are going to be implemented. So one roundabout at one intersection maybe in the next 5 years, whereas the full build out maybe in the next 10 years. Or I'm just giving a number here, just an example.
Because, you know, each and every time, Mr. Mayor, that there's something that is deliberated by the planning committee, we say, well, don't worry, the studies have been commissioned and they'll be forwarded to us. And once we have those studies in hand, we'll be able to have a complete picture of the situation. Now, I imagine they've already started to build. I believe that Brazil will be building a pumping station or wish to build a pumping station at a certain point in time. Yes, yes. That was already in the works. We approved the development of the pumping station. I make use of the Brazil situation purely as an example. And after that, we've commissioned a traffic flow study, but we've never discussed about how to go about alleviating our problems. But they're already starting to spend money. So I'm thoroughly confused about what step of the process we're at, because it seems that the studies are coming in after, well, the East-West has been discussed, Mr. Zand. We spoke to Mr. Potvin. He's the one that opposed the four-liner. That's when we talked about the East-West. Mr. Saint-Cartier wanted this also. But this whole thing, when we're talking about Bridgel Stage 5, Round Point East-West package, I'm just confused. I'm confused at what step we're at right now. Why are we spending money upgrading roads when we have no idea exactly what steps they're at in their development, even if it's even approved yet?
Upgrading of the road, like this, in the subdivision agreement, there was a condition that was tied to the study. So the initial language was something to the fact that once the study is going to be done, we would then change the condition, which is what this is doing. So all that was in the initial condition was that the developer would retain a consultant to do the study to support his development, which is what he's now done, which is what is presented. So it's that study. So that study, though, is about, because it's more than one development, it was done between two developers, and it's to support the transportation. I think it's called an East-West collector, but it's to go from Poupal, which was a line which was identified, the schematics of that, to Stage 5 through Stage 5 Morris Village, and then connected to.
We were talking about one that would like go behind.
That's down the road right now.
So that's different. This is really just to address the development.
Okay, when I was talking about that during this whole time when we started approving the plan, we were talking about ways of traffic coming in and out of these developments, which were going to be huge. And we said we're going to need other entrances and exit points, because we can't just feed everything through Sterling, which seems to be like feeding Stage 5, or Saint-Jean through Poupal. And that is going to be way too much traffic for what our roads can take, which is why we discussed other alternative routes, which then I was told, don't worry, the traffic study will come in and will identify where this traffic is going to flow from and to. I'm not seeing that in here. I'm just saying this is fine. Saint-Jean will take it.
So this is what's done in this study. It's identified that it was going to go through Stage 5 Morris Village. That road, I think it's called. I can't remember the exact name of the road. Is going to be built to the recommendation of the study to allow for that traffic coming in and out of Morris Village, and then along Saint-Jean, and then on Poupal Street, and then it's going to exit out on the highway. So that's to deal with the immediate development. However, there is also a master plan study that's being done in parallel to this. This is built into the master transportation study that's looking at transportation as a whole within Clarence-Rockland, and are there requirements for another passage, either higher south or of that nature, to connect into Ottawa or away from the Highway 17. And that's a study that's been done through the Master Transportation Study. And so this is really just to address the immediate development.
And you're okay with using the streets we currently have for all of the developments?
They're going to be built up to a standard that's proposed in this study.
I'm Collier.
So this particular report is addressing the concern that council had with the suggestion that we make a 4-lane road to go through Stage 5 development. And at that time, council asked us to do a separate study in conjunction with the overall transportation study to look at whether that road should be 4 lanes or 2 lanes. Right? So they've now come back with a recommendation in this study here that's showing it partially 4 lanes, partially 2 lanes. We've met with the developer, and the developer is in agreement with what was approved. So this study was a subset the council asked us to do, to specifically look at the collector road.
Yeah, but you're feeding everybody, according to the map that I'm looking at, through Carmen-Bergeron. So I'm looking at a map right now, it's got Carmen-Bergeron, turns on the Port, goes all the way to Port. So we had already talked about that is already a crazy area just from people coming out of Walmart and Boston Pizza and LCBO. And you want to add this road to feed an entire development, it's just not going to work. Which is why we had talked about making it go behind Walmart.
Yep.
Okay. So Mr. Mayor, it's not going through Carmen-Bergeron, it's going through Browns Avenue, which is the road that is going to be within stage 5, that's going to be designed to accommodate the traffic within that development.
Well, I'm looking at a map right now. I don't know which, I guess this is page. Yeah.
So it says, like in the resolution, it says that Paul Side Road, Browns Avenue, Saint Jean Street be designed and built to municipal standards with the urban cross sections approved by the city. So that is the
So this is the one that you want to make 4 lanes, Saint Jean.
So Saint Jean, so Paul is going to become a 4-lane as per the recommendation of the.
That's got room.
What's that?
That has room to do 4 lanes, but Saint Jean doesn't have room to do 4 lanes.
What do you mean it doesn't have room?
Have you been to the intersection of Saint Jean and Laurier?
Yeah. So I mean, in order to do that, there's going to be, the road is going to be widened. We have a right of way. The road's going to be widened in the right of way.
There are houses like that are stuck to them. Anyways.
Yeah.
Look, I'll let you worry about that. I don't think that that's the right way to go. And certainly if Carmen-Bergeron, according to the map I'm seeing of Etrel Engineering, saying that traffic would be fed through that area for Paul, that doesn't work.
So
I don't know.
So it's going to be staged again. So some during the development of the subdivision, some of the traffic is going to be channeled through the existing roads. That was reviewed, whether or not there's capacity for that. And then as development occurs, then it's going to trigger some improvements. So improvements along Paul Road becoming from a 2-lane becoming a 4-lane road. That's not going to occur right away. That's going to occur as development happens, and it's triggered in different phases based on the growth, and so in the report, it identifies the different phases, and so there's no issue with that.
Hey,
Is the designer of this and the one doing the master plan the same company?
No.
So how do we know they're working in conjunction?
Because we've coordinated with them and made sure that they received this design and this study. So we've worked in parallel with both companies to make sure that they were working in the same direction.
I find this has a lot of details in it. Maybe like just a simple presentation would maybe help us a little bit better than all the numbers and all that. Like Monsieur Zant said that we're not engineers, so maybe just a presentation with specific slides telling us which road, where you think, like where it's going to be and all that.
We could put something together to.
That was my comment. I'm not an engineer, and there's traffic flow with numbers, peak hours, low hours. I mean, you're asking us to make a decision with engineers' data that needs to be simplified for us. And again, we go back to that famous question, what is a collector? Is it a 4-lane where no driveways can have access? We're going to have a major problem with I'm surprised that Stage 5 or Space Builder has agreed to this. Because if we define a collector, meaning there cannot be any driveway, I surely remember his plan that he has submitted as driveways onto that collector. So I think we need to receive clearer picture of where we're going with this, and ultimately we'll make the decision if it's good or if it's not good. I know it's a study, but if we're not satisfied and want to extend maybe Poupal to go behind Walmart and join the 17 further down, we got to remember we've got baseline also. I just find that this collector is about 200 meters from Duck Bay. It's very close. I know there's a lot of houses, but once you get into Stage 5, there's a lot of room down south maybe to have an east-west better made corridor. I just find that we're reactive, Mr. Mayor. Stage 5 comes in, they're ready to build, and now, whoa, we got to design a road. You go to Ottawa, there's some roads that are already designed, there's not a single house there. They are planning ahead. And now I feel, and I could be wrong, that we're being asked to make a quick decision that, I'm honest, I don't understand all the data.
Well, if we're not satisfied, we can defer it. Come back with more information.
I agree with Mr. Simard to have a presentation.
Parce que une question que moi j'ai, c'est...
Well, the questions I do have deal with the section that you've spoken to concerning the extension that leads on to Highway 174. This is not property that is owned by the City of Clarence and Rockland. Once you get to the end of Poupal, you have to turn to drive towards Walmart. Now, someone will have to purchase this particular type of extension or build it up. So if we resort to development, that's fine, as you alluded to, but at a certain point in time, when Brazil will start building there quite quickly and Stage 5 develops into a full-fledged building phase, well, then people will go towards Ottawa. Well, this will go towards Ottawa, and it's going to be building towards 174. You'll have a whole bunch of people, you know, making use of available space and small side streets here, there, and everywhere. Therein lies my difficulty. Second, well, can we specify the difference? That we might defer, let's say, and that we ask that the presentation be given to us to obtain more information before taking a final decision? Are you in agreement with that, Mr. Leonard? Yes, I'm in agreement with that, Mr. Mayor. All those in favor, then, to defer this for further discussion and to obtain further info. Let's go on now to the other item, Council Group Benefits Information. Yes, I'll read the resolution, Mr. Mayor, that report HR 2019-08 be received for information purposes, seconded by Councillor Zant. So, now, when something like this is brought to us for consideration, I'd like to determine whether a lot of people had their hand in preparing this data instead of only one or two. I find it ridiculous to be asked, you know, you're either in or you're either out. Some of our employees are covered, others are not. And everyone has the right to, nobody has the right except for the mayor for certain benefits. I mean, we're all equal here. And, you know, at my age, it's $180 per pay. The pay is not all that much, first and foremost. And I'll wind up with $2,000 per year when everything's paid and done. Really, hold on. Look, if I've lasted 2 years after I finished working, somebody's going to make money with the donations I've given out. Look, it's got to be geared with what's remaining. That's why I would like to obtain a bit more information. A bit more information, really. Well, benefits were separated. Were split, basically. There are benefit-related options that I'm in agreement with. Mr. Mayor, this is for information purposes. Well, next time around, Mr. Lalonde, just include it in the report and say, this is what OMERS states, not just state in that I had occasion to read the report, that that's what the report yielded for information-wise. Yes, but can we also determine, well, not whether all town councillors wish to subscribe to this insurance or not? From a benefit standpoint. Well, from a benefit standpoint, this is all. Well, can we ask OMERS, what we call OMERS, why some town councillors have access to some provisions and not others? Michel already has an OMERS pension, eh? Don't you, Michel? Eh? It's not a lot. I know that it's not a lot. Well, do you need this data tomorrow or? Well, I don't need it overnight, of course. Well, Mr. Bouchard would like to obtain information tomorrow before subscribing to any type of plan. So we'll defer any action on this. Let's go on to monthly report concerning protective services. So we've deferred our final decision with regards to group benefits to obtain further information. So this will be brought back for further discussion at the next regular meeting of council. Yes, along with a bit more information. We need a bit more information. This is what we wanted to determine. Did you wish to have this report forwarded to the next Committee of the Whole? Mr. Grimard? Item 9.6, monthly report, protective services. That report number PRO 2019-009 in regards to monthly statistics be received as information. Any questions? I'd just like to make a comment. I thought that it was great that following an important residential increase that our fire chief appeared on radio and conducted an interview to explain all of this, especially during the last fire, because people set aside articles of clothing, and for you to get to the fire itself, yes, when this barn caught fire, it had been cleaned for the past 2 years, so there was some machinery, there was some city machinery or municipal machinery that was in that area. Messages sent out to residents that if you have buildings somewhere that are isolated, make sure that they're accessible to allow fire trucks to gain easy access if ever there's a fire to that building, so that they can put it out. And even insurance companies require that this be done. It was fairly impressive to go down the hill in order to take the bus to get to school, especially during that particular morning, Mr. Mayor. I heard this. Everyone in agreement? Fine. Monthly report, construction. Councillor Simard. Last item on the agenda. That the monthly construction department statistics be received for information purposes. Seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Any questions? Councillor Grimard. I just want to make sure that we have the proper figures. Of course, January and February 2018. We have 3.4 million from a total standpoint. In 2019, we're starting off from 4.9 million to 6 million, but we have less permits issued. Well, there's the ATG-related construction permit that was issued, and the retirement home. Even though the number of permits was decreased, those that were issued, because I don't see anything with regards to commercial use. Well, it might be a single-family dwelling, Councillor Grimard, as opposed to other dwellings. But we're talking about less permits issued, but more money taken in. That's because of the nature of the permits issued. All right, all those in favor? Carried then. Any other items? If you have any questions, Councillor Grimard, now's the time to... Well, we're talking about fires, and that concerns Mr. Zant and myself because that impacts our sector. There was a house that caught fire, and it's been there a long time ago, and it's been laying there for a long time. What do we have with regards to legal recourse? You have also one on Caron Street, the one. So, do we have an idea as to when options can be implemented, or measures can be taken to either rebuild that area, or this burnt building be taken down? Caron, Laurier in a northerly direction, and there was a garage that had been transformed beside Mr. Sancartier's project, basically. Well, I'll have to obtain further information. I don't recall this particular incident anymore. I know it's in the lawyer's hands right now, and things are not moving all that quickly. That's where we're at present, and I can obtain further information. Go ahead, Mr. Zant. I'd already spoken of this to Mrs. Bégin, and I was told by her that things are developing slowly but surely because someone had died during the course of this particular fire, and there was no will that was left. There are family issues. I just say that the person has been reached and they're looking into it. That's it. Any other questions then? To department heads, adjournment called? I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand raised. I have a question for you, Helen, or for the deputy.
At the end of February, the CRFD firefighters took part in a third-party interview in order to help assess the firefighters' concerns about numerous departmental issues within, and in regards to Station 3. I guess I would like to, for us, council, to have the original report that was sent to Chief Wilson, IHR, and yourself in order for us to be shared with us. That's it. Thank you.
Anything else? Adjournment? Let's see here. Somebody's blocking my view of the clock, of the official clock that we... All right. So 9:37 p.m. All right. Thank you very much, folks. Thank you very much. Have a good evening, and we'll see you next time then.